House of the Dragon Episode 3 has just released on HBO Max, and we get an episode that focuses on disputes surrounding the birth of the king's son, Rhaenyra's struggles in the midst of that, and Daemon taking some action. In this spoiler review and analysis, I'm going to be breaking down and giving you my thoughts on House of the Dragon Episode 3, entitled Second of His Name. But before I get into it, if you want to see more videos on Season 1 of House of the Dragon, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. Also, feel free to check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram at Cortex Videos, which is all linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's dive into my review and breakdown for House of the Dragon Episode 3. So the episode title, Second of His Name, refers to the fact that Viserys' newborn son Aegon shares a name with Aegon the Conqueror, the warrior who once united the Seven Kingdoms under the Targaryen rule we see today. Of course, most of those in power or around the king presume that young Aegon will overtake Rhaenyra as the new heir to the throne, and the episode focuses on showing the complex significance of that and how Rhaenyra and Viserys feel towards everything going on. It links appropriately into the particular timeline of this episode too. Apparently, it's been 3 years since the events of the previous one, and after learning that Viserys intended to marry Alicent Hightower, we see that this decision has casted more doom on the king himself. While the king and a pregnant Alicent are celebrating the second birthday of their son and are at peace with marriage, Viserys has put a bigger wench in the relationship with his daughter, he's lost the powerful connection with Corlys Velaryon, and as this episode firmly highlights, shown that he's not an effective king. When his advisors initially bring up the losing battle in the Stepstones, one that poses a danger to everyone in the Seven Kingdoms, the king ignores this until the end. He's focused on the future of Rhaenyra, and he wants her to hurry along and marry to create a new powerful connection. The preferable outcome for the king would be for her to marry someone who brings a new alliance for the Targaryens, but one that's not too powerful, as that person could make a play for the throne in the future. We focus a lot on the king getting drunk, alongside feeling saddened over thinking his daughter hates him and that his men look at him with weakness. A lot of that comes through the fact that he's a very indecisive ruler, but I do get the anxieties surrounding it too. Of course, most around him would want to see baby Aegon as the heir, and his decisions surrounding that lead to more tensions rising. All of this begins at a luxurious get-together on the edge of the Kingswood, celebrating the second birthday of Aegon. We are quickly introduced to a new Lannister called Jason Lannister, who eyes up Rhaenyra and eventually suggests that she could be his wife. We learn that this was encouraged by Viserys, and with her rejecting the proposal and leaving the Kingswood party, it leaves her father with more stressful thoughts. Sir Criston Cole goes after her, staying with the current heir for a night of camping and listening to her talk about how she doesn't want to get married off at random. She doesn't like that her ex-friend has married her father, that he has a son, and that she'll be replaced as heir. While I found in previous episodes that Rhaenyra came across as quite one note, I did like that this one focused a lot more on her frustrations and the complex position that she and the king are both in, and it's in conversations like this, which we'd get in the earlier seasons of Thrones, that make you connect more with the characters and their current anxieties. The problem I had with this episode is the way the action that supports it doesn't feel seamlessly constructed, and it feels like it's there to suspend disbelief. It reminded me of a bad mix between Season 1 and Season 8 of Game of Thrones, and I just wish it was executed better. We could have used use this moment to further show some deeper chemistry between Rhaenyra and Criston Cole, but instead, the scene is interrupted by a raging boar, which they take down together, with the current heir killing it bloody. While this is happening, we get a whole scene with Alicent interacting with the grand dames of the court, giving us some added exposition surrounding the war in the Stepstones and Rhaenyra's disconnection from her uncle Daemon. It just feels like there were interesting moments which were pulled down by less interesting ones or shocking action, and I think the final scene of this episode makes that even clearer. But I'll get into that once we reach the ending of episode 3. Before we do, there is a final moment in this celebration affair, and it involves the king on his way to kill a white hart that has been spotted in the Kingswood. They say that the white hart is a symbol of royalty, and if Viserys were to carry out the killing, it would apparently act as a good sign for their power going forwards. But when he arrives to do so, there's actually no white hart, and instead, they only manage to capture a regular old stag that his men hold by ropes at the antlers. In a slow struggle, he kills it after 2 stabs, and I think the whole sequence carries a great meaning. It can mean, for one, that he's failing as a king because he's quite indecisive and slow in his actions, and 2, the stag's death is heard by Rhaenyra and Criston across the Kingswood, in which they actually see the white hart. With Criston ready to draw his sword on it, she decides to let it live, and therefore, it shows the current situation in a metaphorical fashion. It's probably the most effective scene in this entire episode, and I think just in those few minutes, it communicates the feelings and actions of both Viserys and Rhaenyra more successfully than the other elongated scenes that we saw. And it all leads to a final few scenes in King's Landing where we get an important moment between the 2 central characters. Viserys tries to restore friendly words with Rhaenyra, and he tells her that she should be the one to choose whom she marries, and swears on her mother's life that he won't revoke her as heir. So while he's going to do the right thing going forward, we know that this is going to cause even bigger problems with everyone else, and we can imagine that the family dynamics are only going to get more tension-filled in the episodes to come. We already saw this kind of moment between them in the previous episode, but I guess episode 3 as a whole showcases even more that the doom will come in the decisions made. Hopefully it does lead to effective moments, because it does promise that the intriguing narrative points are still to come. This brings us to the ending segment of episode 3, which focuses fully on Daemon and Corley's fight in the Stepstones. Mid-war, Daemon arrives on his dragon Caraxes to find his Valyrian allies concerned about their next steps in battle, but he also receives a letter from his king brother. In the letter, Viserys says that he's finally going to provide the forces aid even after the complications between them, and he reminds him that troops and dragons are on the way. This is another one of my favourite scenes in this episode, because with no dialogue, Daemon communicates that he will not accept such a late attempt at help, and it also shows that he's not willing to let his estranged brother back into his life that easily. Daemon reacts by lashing out and beating the king's messenger with his helmet, leaving the island and making his way on a boat to the crab feeder's hideout. I loved everything in this moment up until the point where Daemon, using the suspension of disbelief, decides to fight his way through loads of men and even arrows from the top of cliffs in order to beat the crab feeder. A character who was literally introduced and set up last week, who would go on to meet his bloody death on screen. Don't get me wrong, the action is great to watch and visually spectacular for a 3rd episode in this prequel show, but I just wish it was more believable and was executed in a less silly way. Daemon is basically a one-man army up until he gets struck by multiple arrows, and even then, we see him charging off into the cave after the crab feeder. He was saved by the late arrival of the 2 dragons that Viserys promised, and the Valyrian forces that arrived to kill the raiders. And of course, Daemon still makes the biggest move by killing the crab feeder, re-emerging with half of his body. So while Daemon doesn't say a single word in this episode, I think it speaks to the difference between him him and the king when we've spent a whole episode listening to his brother talk and then him being silent and eventually deadly in action. He may be a violent monster, but he's also a figure of determination, and it's moments like this that might put him forward as the biggest candidate for the throne. He's still as interesting as he was in the last 2 episodes, and I think the performance of Matt Smith really carries this over the line. But like I said before, I just wish the execution of the action surrounding him was better, and the very lengthened scenes in the build-up didn't drag it down as much as it did. Coming to my thoughts on this latest episode of House of the Dragon, Second of His Name gave us 2 storylines, one with fire and the other with the fucking politicking that Viserys so comedically points out. This episode was a slow burn when it comes to how it was paced, but I did really like a handful of scenes within all the events that surrounded Viserys and Rhaenyra. Surprisingly, I liked the moments with Rhaenyra in this episode a lot more than others, and I thought the scene with the stags towards the end was really effective. I think more time could have been dedicated here to pushing these notions forward even more, but I do get that they tried to really help the audience get into the heads of both Viserys and Rhaenyra and create the realization that a decision in one way or another will still lead to bad consequences. While House of the Dragon does move slow at times, it's the character moments and dialogue that make things gripping at times too, and I hope that this can be perfected better in the episodes to come. The questions of marriage, succession, and house loyalty make or break a Game of Thrones show, and that's definitely what excites me here when it's done well. The battles and action scenes, if staged correctly, can really elevate that in a brutal way, but here I think they do falter at times. Again, I loved Daemon's motivation and everything up until he arrives on that shoreline, but the action that follows made me feel like I was watching season 8 again with an extreme suspension of disbelief. The real intrigue of the story lies in the glances and character reactions, and I hope the next episodes can make better use of that, alongside how it stages its action. Still, it was a decent episode from a character point of things, and I think it will be crucial come whatever chaos follows for the Targaryens. But that was my spoiler review and explained video for House of the Dragon Episode 3. I'm giving it a rating of 7.5 out of 10. I will be doing a video every week on the show, so stay tuned to my channel each week for breakdowns and reviews of the Game of Thrones spin-off. But to those who have already seen the episode, what are your thoughts on all the events that went down, and what do you think will happen in episode 4? Let me know down below in the comment section. For more videos on House of the Dragon, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.